I feel like I'm talking to an old friend. Has been a long time.
I know, it's as if we are friends when we're not.
Oh, I think of you as a friend.
Greetings, everyone.
Definitely.
We did promise 100 podcasts ago that Randolph would be back for every podcast that ends in the number 42. And he's back. So, fulfilled promise. I can't remember what bounty was agreed upon.
There was a bounty. Oh,
The only reason you're back.
well, thanks for having me back. I do appreciate it.
All right, we're gonna have a fascinating discussion about debates and logic, as we always have. And I mean, I keep throwing up on screen. I really should stop doing that. Maybe I should do it more and make people more sick of me throwing up a book. But yeah, I'm actually very happy to have done a book on logic now. That feels like it's just cemented. It's there in history. Even if it's wrong, let me know. I'll do a second edition. But yeah, I'm very happy with it.
I think it's your book and your channel. It's perfectly reasonable for you to be letting everybody know that you have published your first book.
Yeah,
and
I think they know.
Wonderful topic. Started with a wonderfully important topic.
Yes, quite. So, in terms of logic and fallacy, I've since writing the book and then having planned what is up to possibly fifth book. In terms, I mean, I'm gonna do all the ones in between, but up to 5. I'm starting to also think about how it's going to actually be applied in the real world. So this is always to gearing people towards just having the base knowledge to start with. You're someone, for those who don't know, who ends up quite fairly frequently going into debates and actually identifying them and hopefully not using them in a more intermediate fashion.
I would like to get into them more frequently. I don't think I'm in them that frequently as far as the formal ones on video go. I suppose you're probably also including the ones that you've seen on Twitter from time to time. And so that,
yes.
that would definitely ramp the numbers up. So, and I've had practice running troll accounts back on Google Plus, doing debating with those, and back on Usenet days as well, before Google Plus came along, and also on Facebook for a while. They're a lot of fun. I think the main point with logical fallacies, though, is when dealing with people, I don't generally tell them, like in a person-to-person debate, I don't generally say, oh, that's the ad hominem fallacy or attack, or that's some kind of Tokuk fallacy, or I'm saying that wrong, Tukok fallacy. I always mess that one up, or the bandwagon fallacy. I tend to not use those terms because I think they're very academic and very technical, and it can make a conversation quite boring for an audience as well. And it's easy to get wound up in these things, and some people do. I think keeping it as just general, normal chat makes it easier for everyone to follow the conversation, and it just kind of makes things flow better. I have nothing against those terms. And once in a while, I will point it out, say, okay, now what you're doing is called the bandwagon fallacy, when I think it's important to really emphasize that. And I think most of the times, just recognizing the fallacy without publicly identifying what it is and just responding to it and addressing it is already enough in most cases. And I think it makes for better debate. Otherwise, you got everybody saying, oh, you're doing this and you're doing this, and everybody ends up talking in what seems like a different language to people who may not be so familiar with them. But it's good to mention them once in a while, at least.
Sure, in moderation, absolutely. I completely agree, because people do end up getting switched off, and especially if you're trying to communicate with somebody and change their mind, it may not be the best idea just to keep pointing out that they're wrong, because it comes across as maybe arrogant.
So when I go into these debates, my attitude isn't to try to convince them. This is a common approach that a lot of people use. My approach is to go there with the hope that they'll show me something, they'll challenge my ideas. So I have a bit of a selfish motive there, so that I can possibly improve my way of thinking. But I do find that most people in debates don't have this approach. They're using a different approach of trying to win and beat everybody. They see it as something to win. And I think everybody wins when somebody learns something new. And that's a much better approach. And that's why I like to try to mix conversation into it and have a conversation as well, because it makes it a lot more interesting, and it makes it easier to understand the other person's perspectives and then try to figure out what's really trying to be conveyed, what people are really trying to convey. And those kind of conversations can be a lot more, they usually tend to have a much more polite tone as well. And so I think more people enjoy that, because there are so many debates out there that are just a knockout, drag out kind of fight, knockdown, drag out kind of fight. And so I'm going more for the conversation as well. Gone seem to be the days where you see people like Christopher Hitchens up debating with one or more people, and and sometimes he'd be teamed up with people. And he's before it starts, they'll take a survey from the audience on what people agree, disagree, or abstain on the proposition of the debate. And then at the end, they'll take that again and they'll compare the numbers. Those I really enjoyed, and it's a shame we don't see very much of that anymore. And I think for a formal debate, when you have an audience there sitting in a theater or an Orpheum or something, you've got the opportunity to do this. You can do this. And so the debate organizers should do this, but I feel like a lot of them have gotten kind of lazy and they're not doing it anymore. It's a shame, because it would be really, really, it's always interesting to see the numbers at the end and think, yeah, I know which way I'd vote. So.
It would be, modern day debate does it so well. I don't feel the need to go into that sort of realm just yet. But if there ever becomes a need for me to create a fourth channel, then I think it would be on the debates, just to host them, just to make sure that that's a platform where people can just go, if they want to debate, they don't need me, they could just have access to it, kind of thing. Hey Neil, down in the comments. I am keeping tabs in the comments, don't worry.
Neil's there. Hey Neil.
God damn it, Neil. Damn politeness. Honestly, I was thinking about this the other day, and about how there could be very easily a comedy skit done where somebody, maybe not myself, but somebody from the UK could end up just going through all the Commonwealth countries and how they project a very specific part of our personality. So Canada's very polite. America wants to take over the world.
America's not Commonwealth.
I say, wow, we owned them. You know what I mean.
You're just having trouble letting go.
Shut up! I have to say, my favourite's probably Australia. They're dangerous.
Yeah, and many Australians seem quite proud of that, I've noticed. I kind of
banging on about it.
And I kind of admire that, actually. So,
as that said, Vincent's turned up, said, "Good day, mates." Don't know whether that was before or after we started talking about Australia, but hello to you. And Enid, one of my members. So I should throw this one out there, especially because I already have a super chat from Glass Monster. I am aware, don't worry, they are flashing up on the screen. I've now got a 40-inch TV to my side. This setup is much more like Chris's from Daily Atheist, if you've seen that video, where it's just screens everywhere. Right.
I saw that. That was very interesting, that stream. Yeah.
Mine's far simpler, but I've made it slightly more complicated and slightly easier for me, so I can just stand here and just see at a distance what messages I'm getting. Glassmonster said, "Can you make me a mod?" So just to clarify, the first 1,000 subs that turned up in the live chat consistently ended up becoming the mods that you see today. Anyone else on top of that has been a guest on the channel. The only way to become a mod now is to go and join down in the members and press join below this stream, and that'll give you an option as well to throw out some emojis, as you can probably see. Vincent, if you're still around, which I think you are, just throw out all of those different emojis, work out how to actually type them up, and then throw them down into the live chat so everyone can actually see. I want everyone else to decide what they are as well. If you don't want them to end up. Oh, thank you, Glass Monsters, become a member. So if you don't like the emojis very much, just get in touch and say, hey, just make an emoji of Randolph's face crying or something like that, and I'll be like, yeah, that's a great idea, and I'll just make it like that. So there we go, they're all down in the live chat. Thank you for that, Vincent. So enough talking about me. As we were talking about the fallacies, I did propose, and then I realised I just said we're not going to talk about me, and I just said I did propose a new fallacy. I want to check this over because I don't know whether you have actually seen it or heard of it. So, I mean, there's already dance law, which is insisting that you'd won the argument.
Sorry, dance.
Dance.
Sorry, dance.
DAN.
Oh, dance. Oh.
Yeah, it's one of those awkward ones to say. When I'm doing the audiobook, it's really awkward as well. I'm
Spell
like,
that.
dance. Right, my mouth's just going everywhere. DANTH, yeah.
Okay.
Dance. Say it slowly.
So what is that? I've not heard that one.
So, oh, okay, fair enough. I can go over it. This is just going to become a reading. Do apologise.
I know about Godwin's law. I know about Murphy's law. Whether I like it or not, I know about Murphy's law. I think that's the case for everybody. But Danth law, it's a new one. Okay.
That's one that already exists. So it's when you insist that you've won the argument. So it's somebody who's very it goes back to internet culture, whereby somebody will end up saying, I won this particular argument, even if it's on Twitter. It doesn't have to be a formal debate. But then, typically speaking, if somebody comes forward and declares themselves the victor, it's probably because they were completely destroyed. So there goes the law itself.
Yeah, that's I've encountered people doing that quite a few times over the years. And even with one of my troll accounts, I committed that fallacy, but it was a troll account that was purposely being arrogant. And so,
well, yeah.
I've been on both sides of that.
So I ended up proposing an ad Victoria, and again, I'm still looking for sort of guidance on this, because I will just throw things out there. There are fallacies I want to put in a future book as well, and I'm just coming out with these sort of concepts. If somebody else has come up with a different name before and they've already come up with it and they've done 10 pages on it, let me know, and I'll just say, look, I have no idea, and I'll rename it to whatever it already was named. But I proposed the ad Victoria, which is putting emphasis on trying to beat your opponent. So this is before it even happens. Dance law happens after discussion or the debate, but you're actually trying to win, as you say, and beat your opponent. That doesn't necessarily mean that what you're saying is true. And so
Death law is kind of a post-mortem attempt at resurrection.
Yes. Essentially. Yeah. So I proposed that there's various different mannerisms that we use during debates in which we try to end up embarrassing the other person, or our intention is to beat them, or it depends on the audience, essentially. Yeah. But it always helps, as far as I'm concerned, to end up with a one-to-one, because then you're not necessarily inclined to win. Well,
yeah, and again, like I say, with the debates, it's more of I like to phrase it as the free exchange of ideas, and to me, it's an exchange that you're having with somebody else. It's exchange over a controversial matter, hopefully, because those tend to be more interesting. But it is an exchange of ideas nonetheless, and it provides a lot of people, hopefully, with an opportunity to learn. And your attitude with the book, that if somebody's finding something that needs to be improved, you're going to take it. I applaud you on that. I think it's wonderful, because I think that's the correct approach to use. It kind of benefits everybody, you know. It's I used to have a big Mad Magazine centerfold from the 1980s. I had it on the front of my desk when I did IT help desk work, and it had 2 lines. It says, "Everybody makes mistakes," and I just had that on the front. And it was interesting because people in those days, they'd come up to your desk instead of phoning or emailing, because for computer issues. About half the people noticed the mistake. The other half didn't. I never said anything to anybody, but the ones that noticed, it was like, hey, there's, oh, I get that. That's a joke. It was a lot of fun. So, yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. We did mention debates. And we did also very briefly down in private Twitter DMs discuss doing a dual debate, as it were.
A dual debate.
Yeah, so just a very quick one. It's saying because you've got a second account in the Zoom chat, you need to be careful, otherwise it will start to end the meeting because we've got 3 people rather than 2.
You talking to me?
Yeah, so that's just flashed up on screen. Do apologise.
It says remaining meeting time 9 minutes 34 seconds here.
Yeah. Oh dear. Participants 2 though. So well, that's annoying.
So we better make this quick. I guess we can
No,
always...
it's never done. No, it's never done that. It's because we've got 3 in. Well, we had 3 participants in the chat, but it's now saying we've got 2 participants. That's never. What? Sorry about this, people watching.
Huh.
Zoom has unlimited chat for 2 people, but when it's got 3, it only has a limit of 40 minutes.
I don't know why there'd be another one there. I just, when I go into participants, it says 2 here.
Yeah, it says 2 for me.
2 of us.
Gosh. Right, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to keep going, and if it then breaks down and fails, we're going to end up starting a new stream. We'll do a part 2 immediately after.
Sure.
Okay.
If you can use the same stream key, then maybe you can continue. I don't know if YouTube allows that. So
yeah.
No idea why this.
No,
this must be a bug in Zoom. There's something wrong.
Must be. Sorry about that, boys and girls. So, what were we talking about? Yeah, we were talking in private Twitter DMs about dual debates. What are they actually called? Like 2v2 debates. I can't think of what they're called. What would you call them? People's live chat. Dual debates? Tag team debates? Tag team debates. Tag team.
Oh, team. Oh, it's a team debate. Okay. Oh, so you're calling them dual debates. I've never heard that term before.
Yeah, I was wondering what they're called.
So that probably is why.
Dual debate?
No, you're talking about setting up a debate channel. One thing I would recommend is that if you're going to host a debate, make sure you have a separate person looking at the chat and bringing up the important chat things to your attention as the moderator, because as the host, because I've seen modern day debate used to do that, and then I've noticed when they don't do that, it's a bigger burden for the moderator, and they seem to run into trouble keeping up with the debate if a lot of stuff's going on in the chat. So it splits the moderator's focus, and then things may not always go so smoothly in debates as they should, I think. So having a separate person doing that is very important. He had me on one time to moderate a debate between Jim Majors and a Catholic fellow named Caleb. I forgot his last name. I wish I didn't, but I ran. It was the first debate I ever ran, and it ended up going quite well because there was another person there who was looking after all the questions that come through on the chat. The challenge I ran into there was that I kept asking them, okay, what questions are coming in from the chat? And they waited until the end before dumping them all on the screen at once for me. So no, you got to send them in as it goes, because if one of the questions from the chat fits in, then me as the moderator, I'll interject that in the middle of the debate. That's what I wanted to do. And then the context is there. Otherwise, you have to review context later. So and that can be a nice thing, although it's not what I would normally be intending to do. But a little bit of that intermixed is quite nice too, I think. So make sure you have another person to look after the chat, the live chat, while that's going on. And then you'll be able to focus entirely on what's going on in the debate and make sure everything's happening fairly.
So what is the actual difference in terms of your own personal experience between a 1-to-1 debate and a 2v2 debate, like you did with Jim?
Well, Jim and I both. It was our first teamed debate. Neither of us have ever been in a teamed debate before. He ended up doing more of the talking, a lot more, and so he's that kind of personality. He's more out there and go get there, where I'm kind of a little bit more holding back and letting other people go first and whatnot. So, and it really showed in there. What I learned from that is I need to be more assertive when I have a debate partner. So it was a very, very educational experience. What he was saying was so interesting, I thought. So I didn't want to interrupt him, because once he's going, he's very knowledgeable about the Bible and all this, which is not my strong point. I was more interested in the ethical, philosophical aspects, and that's what I tried to focus on. It was interesting that the other people were our adversaries were trying to. When Jim was starting to really hammer them, they suddenly said, "Oh, we want to hear from Randolph now." So I was a bit of a saving grace for them, so to speak. They could switch to, because I hadn't had much chance to talk, and I was glad to get a chance to say a few things. So I did start off with the opening statement, though, and my opening statements tend to be a bit on the short side. I try to keep them brief, because I think when I've listened to debates, very often I'll hear a very long opening statement and then another very long opening statement. And to me, it seems kind of tedious. And I find myself thinking, oh, when's this debate going to start? I want to hear them debate. I want to hear them exchanging ideas instead of just telling their positions. So so I always try to keep them a bit short, so that way it's we get on toward the debate a lot sooner.
Yeah, I personally, from a viewer's perspective, just hate the whole 5 minutes like unchallenged. You just have a little statement at the start. You can just say whatever you like, and it's just.
I think 5 minutes is okay. I think 10 minutes is a bit long. It starts to turn into a presentation.
For 4 people as well.
Yeah. So it's, but it was good. I definitely like the one-on-one. I've told James, that the moderator of Modern Day Debate, that if he's got, I'm willing to go up against any number of adversaries. So it could be me versus 2 or 3 or 4. It doesn't matter to me how many are there. I'm willing to take.
With that, why would anybody even accept that? If I were in a situation where I could have like me, you, Jim Majors, whoever else, T Jump, as a 4 against.
I like T Jump a lot. T Jump's great. Yeah.
He's a nice guy.
They've both been excellent. Yeah.
If we had 4 of us against one person, why would we even accept that debate? It goes into what's actually referred to as the balance fallacy. You've heard of it.
What if that one person was Dr. William Lane Craig?
That would probably. I still think it's a bad idea, because just on balance, it comes across as these 4 people are equal to this one person from a viewer's perspective, and it ends up. I mean, that is the balance fallacy, but it comes across as if we're somehow a 25th of him in what we're saying. Doesn't matter what we say. So
that's an interesting breakdown, because I don't get that impression when I see it. Like when I see somebody, like only one person can talk at a time. And what you're doing is you're challenging the ideas. You're not challenging the person. Normally in a proper debate, although Christopher Hitchens even said he's not above using ad hominems from time to time, and he's done just that. So I think when it comes down to the back and forth with different ideas, it really doesn't matter how many people are on each side. So that's why the reason I offered it was so that it makes it easier for him to pair people up. So if he's got 2 people who are a team or 3 people who are a team, and he can't find another equal number of participants, and he can find one person who's willing to talk with them, then that satisfies it, and then he can actually get the debate going, right? So that's my intention, is to try to be helpful and get more debating experience. There was one time Christopher Hitchens was up against, I think, a panel of 3 or 4 or 5 Christians. And he said something about he's right in the lion's den or something like that. Everybody laughed. I think William Lane Craig was one of the people there, but he sat on the other side of Christopher Hitchens, I noticed, which was interesting. It's like he's distancing himself from all the other Christians. We got 20 seconds left, and I guess we got to switch over.
So I don't actually know what's going to happen. If this all just goes to shit and completely shuts down in 10 seconds, then we'll just start another stream, exactly the same stream. Just stay on the channel, everybody.
Yeah. Hopefully we can reconnect.
Yeah.
2 seconds.
There we are. Right. So, be back in just a second. It won't take very long. Get a drink. Fair enough. I have pressed the button, so we should now be back. But there we are. Biddy Love was saying, I'll make a cuppa and roll a smoke. I hope this exact stream is now back. If not, it probably ends up cutting into 2 videos like it did with Andrew Seidel when he was on. And I'll just end up doing either a part 1 and part 2, or I'll just spend my time going through, cutting it up into one coherent podcast and re-uploading.
Looks like, yeah, it says the stream ended, so you'll need to start a new stream and post the YouTube address for the new one in the chat and in the YouTube description, I guess.
Gosh, well, I'm sure what I'm going to do.
That's a shame.
Yeah, I'm going to very quickly run. Unless you're in the chat now, then you can type it while I'm talking. I don't want to run off screen.
If you put it to me in Twitter, I'll gladly put it into the chat for you.
Sure. So what I was going to do, because I really wanted to still talk about the actual debates themselves.
Yeah, I want to get into the state of atheism as well, and some other stuff.
Yeah.
If you want, we could even talk about what happened recently with Steve McRae and why I disassociated from and canceled that conversation debate, since that kind of fits with debate stuff. I won't say anything nasty. Don't worry.
Right, so this is going to be, it might come up as loud. Hopefully that doesn't produce anything. Get rid of that. Good. Wasn't any sound.
There's been a lot of people asking me about that, saying they wished that debate happened because they wanted to see it. So.
Yeah, it's a real shame. It's a real shame because I've just put that link down in the description. So yeah, I really want to actually see it myself, because it's one of those situations whereby you've got somebody like Steve, who I've had on. He's very nice to me, and he's going through all this non-sequitur stuff as well. I think it was last night where Carl Curtis was on Progressive Liberal. That was an interesting conversation. Some interesting screenshots were shown of Ball getting paid consistently and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's bad acting on both sides there, it looks like to me. I used to care, but then after Steve's reaction, I don't care anymore. He was pretty nasty to me at the end. So, are we live right now?
Oh yeah, sorry, we are live.
Okay, so I don't know what the new video address is, but that's okay. I assume everybody in the chat is logging into the new.
Dave's thrown it down, and I've sent it to you on the Zoom chat. What I'll do, because I've now got the old stream coming up with messages on TV, so I'm going to have to just run over there for like 30 seconds. But I'm going to ask you a question, or at least if you've got some thoughts about your debate with Steve McRae that never transpired, then feel free.
Okay, well, yeah, so go ahead, ask your question. Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, in terms of the actual debate it was going to be about the definition of atheism, I think, and how he is very sort of committed to agnosticism.
So what happened is that's how a lot of people understood it, and then he was not in favor of that being the debate topic. So what he suggested was it be about the epistemology of atheism. So I said, okay. And I pointed out that my understanding of epistemology is that it's knowledge and understanding of something. And there was no objection to that. So Jay from the Nevermore Tavern was interested in hosting it. He offered to host it. And so Steve was okay with having him as a moderator, and so was I. And the reason that came up is because originally Steve had approached me and asked me to debate with him on this. And he wanted to host it on his channel. And I said, no, on this topic, based on my experiences with you so far in Twitter, it will have to be on neutral ground, so to speak. So we'll need to find a moderator that we can both agree to use, that we both agree will be fair and impartial. And so then I suggested James from Modern Day Debate, and Steve said, absolutely not. That guy had all these horrible things to say about him in the private chat. And so okay, if he's objecting to it, fine, whatever. He doesn't have to go into all that. And then, so we're looking for somebody else. And then, but just before Jay from Nevermore Tavern, the Nevermore Tavern offers, I noticed there's Steve on with another fellow on Modern Day Debate. It's Something is Always Right. I'm trying to remember the whole name of the person, and he's quite intelligent, actually. He's made a lot of excellent, high-quality arguments in response to it, and he was kind of knocking down quite a bit of the arguments that Steve uses, because he does make a lot of logical missteps. He uses wrong information, or he'll quote studies or research papers that don't have really anything to do with atheism, and he's using that to say, okay, so they have a definition of atheism here, so there you go, this is what he's relying on, which is not really enough quality for this. We take a look at somebody like Anthony Flew, who wrote specifically about this topic, and that one has a lot more credence, because this guy, it fits with what he's doing. So yeah, so that was an interesting turn of events. So when Jay with the Nevermore Tavern came in and offered it, Steve immediately jumped on that and said, yes, I'd be happy with that. And then I responded shortly after that I agree with that too. So we had agreement there. And then it was the topic. So the topic got sorted out, the epistemology of atheism. So that was fine. And so all that was left was to schedule a date and time. So this went back and forth a few times, and then what happens is Steve keeps, and I right from the beginning I said, look, I always want to have at least a week's notice for something like this, so that I can let lots of people know, and then he can do the same, and then we can hopefully get a bigger audience and all this, and that'd be quite nice for Jay as an Nevermore Tavern, because this kind of thing would hopefully bring more subscribers to him as well, and because I'd like to see his channel be more successful. Then what happened was, and even behind the scenes, there was some fun stuff that Steve and I chatted about. I said to him, look, you know that Pope hat you have, the Pope of Agnosticism? And he said, yeah. I said, if you put that on at some point during the debate, I'll put on my cowboy hat. And he thought it was a great idea. So we were kind of planning to have a few surprises amidst our heated debate. It was great. So I was really, really looking forward to this, because what I was intending to do when the debate started was to kind of state my position, and I know he's going to do the same. And then what I would first try to do is venture into areas where embark in conversation, where we have points of agreement. Like, I agree with him that the flat earthers are, the earth's not flat. You know, I agree with him on that. I agree with him that the Catholic Church has done some horrific things to children and to nuns as well. To all these kind of their sexual abuse epidemic is a major issue. So I would start with things like this, because I believe that when we start on this kind of footing, the potential for having a really nice and constructive conversation is much, much greater. And then we can get into the points about why he thinks the way he does and why I think the way I do. And that's what I was hoping to do. So, and I told him this too. So what I'm hoping to do is to have a constructive conversation with him. When he first approached me, his attitude was that he wants to have this debate with me to teach me about atheism. So it's like, it's a kind of a different thing, but then that kind of settled down. So we never ended up deciding on a date and time, although there was stuff that was kind of agreed to, that was okay with Jay's schedule and okay with me, and then just didn't hear back from Steve. And then what happened, he's, and it was kind of a shame. And then what happened is I saw a video of him and David Silverman saying in the video that they're going to harass some poor lady right now they're going to assault her, and then they start saying the word of some genitalia over and over again and laughing about it. And then Steve, of course, chimed in with saying he gives his full consent for all of that, and they keep laughing. And to me, I don't think that certain topics are appropriate for being the subject of humor. And one of them is sexual assault. Another one is sexual harassment. I don't think those are funny. I've seen them turn lethal in my childhood. And it was a situation where I really couldn't do anything about it. And what I saw happen, the images haunt me today sometimes. I learned to cope with it. But so when I see these, when somebody's making fun of this kind of stuff, I'm going to stand up against it and say, no, this is wrong. This is not something to make fun of. The same thing like with when Lance that you had on your video before a while ago, he said that he's going to sexually assault you at an event that's coming up that has since been canceled. That is, again, if he was joking about it, it's not funny. It's a very serious matter, and these kinds of things need to be, I think, dealt with seriously, because the damage that they do to people, even just the threat alone, is really bad. So what I'd written to Steve after that, just immediately after seeing that clip, I wrote to him and to David Silver, and I said, look, this, I don't want to have anything to do with you guys. And like with Steve, I pointed out, I'm also canceling the conversation debate that's coming up, because I just don't want, I want to be disassociated from this. And if it wasn't for that, we probably would have had this debate. He responded very badly to that. David responded like he seems open to constructive criticism and wanting to change somehow. So I hope that at least that will happen. But it's a nasty thing. What's interesting happened since I stood up against Steve for that, and David. I've had probably a couple dozen, roughly, mostly women, contacted me privately, and a few people have posted publicly as well, that they like what's happened. But the majority contacted me privately and told me that they really appreciate that I stood up against that. And some of them have even elaborated quite voluntarily that they don't have the courage to do it because it just brings back too many horrible memories for them. It's traumatic for them because they're victims of sexual assault themselves. So this, in retrospect, was a very good thing to do. Another interesting thing that happened is after I had disassociated based on that, 3 days later, there is a nationwide, in the US, restraining order against Steve for sexual harassment. And it got classified under the Violence Against Women Act, which is, my understanding is, that is not very common. And that is what brings it into a national jurisdiction rather than just state only, which most of them are apparently. So it's very, very serious. The judge looked at the evidence and said, this is wrong. So it is interesting. I disassociate from him on this topic of sexual harassment. And then or at least supporting it. And then 3 days later, a restraining order from a judge from somebody else, I guess, has been working on this for a while. I don't think they did that application in a day. Those things probably take months at least before they come together, because they've got to collect evidence. The judge looks through that and decides, yeah, this makes sense. So here, restraining order issued. Those things aren't done lightly, as I understand it. So that's that was interesting. He seems to have quieted right down on all this stuff. He's blocked me, put me in his block list, which is shared around with a lot of other people who support him, and a whole bunch of them have blocked me. I haven't really noticed any less Twitter traffic because I don't really pay much attention to these people, so it hasn't really caused any problems for me. But I have suddenly found myself introduced to a whole bunch of people who they've introduced themselves to me because they're also on that block list. So if anything has been beneficial, I've ended up with more friends online. So it's unfortunate that that's what's happened, because I was really looking forward to getting down to the bottom of this and getting this matter of the definition of atheism kind of at least somehow cleared up or sorted out or something. And it looked like that was probably very likely going to happen. But then, I did finally choose to cancel it for that reason. I have no regrets about doing that. Because I don't want to be associated with that kind of stigma. So,
Yeah, some bits of information are very new to me, so bear with me. I find the whole thing quite bizarre. I even got some slack very recently for being accused of platforming Steve on this channel. I mean, that was something like 80 podcasts ago. That was ages ago.
What was the topic that you had him on for?
So we were talking about. I mean, typically whenever we have these sorts of conversations, especially back in those days, it was just here's a guest. Let's talk everything about them. So it was about non-sequitur
Okay,
at the time and that sort of thing. Definitions of atheism, are rocks atheist, all of that sort of stuff.
the stuff he normally talks about. Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up the woman that they were talking about, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, was Katie Joy, who's Without a Crystal Ball. She did a
Katie
Friday
Joy
segment. Yeah.
Katie Joy Paulson, yeah. I don't know anything about her. I haven't seen her videos, but she's the one who has got that restraining order issued against Steve, because apparently he's been, according to her, has been harassing her for quite a while. And the
Yeah.
fact that a judge approved it after looking at evidence makes it sound like a very highly credible claim. So, but if you're on, like, if you're, you know, I find there's a lot of people say, "Oh, don't platform this person or that person." You know, it's like you've got a show to run. It's I think you'll always be able to find somebody who doesn't like any of your guests. You know, if you look hard enough, and it's see, for me, I think I don't foresee myself ever hosting Steve on my channel if I was doing any kind of interview. Um, the exception to that would be, say, like if there's a criminal who has been in prison, or while they're in prison, if I go to interview them, and they want to talk about what they have done in their past and why they realize now that they should not have done that, I'm perfectly okay with. I think that's a valid topic to platform on. I think that's wonderful. I think if they're going around talking about why they're being, they have a certain attitude, such as a racist attitude, and as the host, you're not challenging them on that, then yeah, you're definitely platforming and promoting them in a way. But if you have them on, let's say you brought the Grand Wizard from the KKK onto your channel to have a conversation with him, everyone knows his positions are bad, right? They're racist, except for other racists. And you have him on the channel, and then you say, "Look, I disagree with your view on this because I think this is wrong. What say you?" Because you're trying to get his perspective. I do think that that's okay as well. So I'm not a big fan of this idea of saying don't platform these people. But I can understand why people are doing that, because what they're trying to do is to shut off support for them. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way. It's a tough one, right? So you have to be very careful, I think, about how you present them when you do platform them. If it is somebody controversial who has done something very bad, then you want to make sure that you're clear on what is the purpose of having the conversation with them. Is your hope to make it constructive? And if you really are trying to have a constructive conversation with the person and you can manage to do that, then I don't really see a problem with it. So, but that, you know, maybe I just don't know enough about the situation. Yeah. So, yeah, it's like you had Lance on your channel and you haven't had him back since. I don't see you going around telling other people not to put him on and not to interview people like John Richards, who are part of that organization. And it's actually, for me, it's quite interesting to hear these people explain what their perspectives are in their own words. With John Richards on Nervardia's channel and others, wow, what an interview that was. I didn't know Nervardia was that good at interviewing. She did an amazing job. She's fantastic. She was brilliant. She was brilliant. And she didn't get upset. She stayed calm and cool, and she just stayed right focused on him. And you could see it was driving him insane almost. And then he got on Shannon Q's channel and made some comment about what she's doing in the kitchen or cooking dinner and stuff, like there's something really, really wrong with these people. And so, but I don't consider that platforming. What Shannon Q and Rivardia and others are doing is it's good because we're getting a perspective so that we can make up our own minds on what's going on there. So they're not telling us what to think. They're saying, here's what this guy says, and letting us make up our own determination on whether we think that's right or wrong. And I think that's always the better choice on that. So when you bring Steve on your channel, I don't have any objection to that. I'll tell you, even though he's got me blocked now, and I really don't have any interest in having anything to do with him myself anymore. I don't have a problem with other people continuing to do whatever they want to do with him. That's up to them, and people should be, I think, free to make their own decision on this. With my kids, I've had to teach, my wife and I have taught them, like when they're encountering friends at school who say, I don't want you to be that other person's friends because I don't like them. This is like elementary school playground tactics is what this is. And so we say, look, we've taught them to talk to their friends and say, look, if you don't get along with so-and-so, that's between you and them. I can still be both of your friends. I'll just make sure I'm not inviting both of you to the same thing at the same time as much as I can help it. And that's how it goes. And so my kids have found that they've had really excellent success with this. They've had a couple of these kids have told them, well, then I'm not going to be your friend anymore. So now they know their true colors. The person's trying to manipulate them, not actually genuinely interested in the friendship. So
interesting.
It's been a good lesson in a way. So yeah, I think it's important that people be free to kind of do what they want to do on these things. And once in a while you'll get a guest who's going to be a problem, and as you've had, and the majority of your guests, the vast majority, have been excellent. You've had great success with all this stuff. So yeah, I said keep on it. You're doing really well.
Thanks, man. I want to get to various different points because there's so much that you touched upon.
So I'm interested in talking about the state of atheism too, by the way. But,
yeah, definitely.
Not capitalist state.
Communist comrade Randolph is answering all the questions.
Comrades and friends. Christopher Hitchens. Neil likes to quote Christopher Hitchens. You mentioned Neil was in the chat earlier, and he and I, as you know, are going to be running a program called True North Talk in the near future. And where
you've been saying that for a year. Come on.
I know, but I'm trying to get my deck fixed, and it's taken longer than expected. And I'm getting things cleaned up here, and then we're going to do this here from my place, actually.
Oh, so yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. So, but it takes a while to get these things together, and we both have full-time jobs, so we're trying to make sure we can make everything work. So it's a bit of a challenge, but we're getting a lot closer. Like we're just we have a producer, Mikey Famine. It looks like he's going to do all this for us, putting all the stuff on the screen. And he's top of the line. I'm really happy that he's involved because the quality of his work is excellent. So I'm very happy, and he's really good with people, so he'll be answering and screening calls, it looks like. So that's going to just work out fabulously well because he'll be able to talk with people really nicely and get a nice tone started for everything. I think this is very important. So he'll represent the show very, very well in that respect. I have full confidence in him. So there's Neil who brought him in actually, so this is great. So so we're looking at getting the phone stuff set up, and there's a lot of details with setting this kind of stuff up behind the scenes. It's a bit of work, and we've never done it before, so we want to make sure we get things rolling properly. We're excited to do it though. Yeah.
So if people do have questions down in the live chat, and then just throw them up, then
yes.
That'd be great. I did notice Faye had come in, Wonder Lady, and Maya. Hello. Faye.
Oh, I know that. I've seen them in the chat before. Hello.
As Faye made a note to me saying way too much advertising, just saying, is that on, just to clarify as well, just throw a message back down saying, is that Nightbot? Because having thought about it, probably I could get rid of those timers that I have in Nightbot now. There's enough people in the chat. I made them ages ago when there was just nobody in the chat, so it was just like, we could throw them down. but it's now up on screen, obviously. So with scrolling graphics, so I don't necessarily need them in the live chat anymore. So just let me know. Give me feedback. Get into my Twitter DMs. Fly away.
Well, I can tell you, I would suggest maybe just don't have them come up as often. Maybe have them come up every 10 or 15 minutes.
They
So
are.
Just
So some of them are every, I think it's like 25 minutes or something like that. So
double the time then.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
They do come up a bit too often.
Yeah, that's fine then. Is that just a live chat talking about?
Yeah, just the live chat, the Nightbot stuff.
Yeah, that's okay then. I could make an
My
adjustment.
YouTube address needs to be corrected. Nightbot has the ID rather than my name on it. So if you get a chance to update the website address on it, that'd be great.
Sure. So you mentioned the Grand Wizard as well. So fun fact.
I like the title. I think it sounds fantastic. Even though I don't like the KKK, I think it's such a cool sounding title.
Agreed. When I was initially going to make a book before it became the podcast, I was going to fill out the book with lots of different interviews, and I did end up contacting KKK to try and get their perspective on a religious perspective. I was going to be a fair individual here. I wasn't going to try and just say these people over here perspective only. Hence, the podcast has become something whereby a lot of guests people do disagree with, and people say, "What are you platforming this person for on your own channel? I've got to police your behaviour." Wow. But yeah, that never transpired. I never actually got a reply. So
that would have been interesting, actually.
Yeah,
they came here to BC a few years ago. Some white supremacist group. I don't recall. I don't think they were KKK, but they're very similar. And they're white supremacists. And they came and they rented some public government space to come and do a presentation on. And so I went down there thinking, because I knew some people were going. I just didn't know who they were, but you heard about it on the radio. And I thought, okay, I'll go down there and there'll be maybe 50 or 60 of us, 100 if we're lucky. And I'll be one of the many people voicing my objections to their ideas. Great, we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll get on TV or something. So I get down there and I go a bit early, and they haven't shown up yet, but there's police around because I guess they know it's going to be contentious. So it's a good decision. And then I was there probably about 8 o'clock. It's scheduled to start at 9. And then by about 10 a.m., it's just a sea of people. And estimates came through that over 30,000 people showed up in protest against the white supremacists. 30,000 or more. Wow. That's fantastic. All these people are against the white supremacists. I did manage to find my way through the sea of people at one point later on in the day and ask the leader of that group a few questions. And people are asking him all kinds of dumb questions. I asked him what he thinks about our Charter of Rights and Freedoms that's part of our Constitution that forbids racism, racist discrimination, and other forms of discrimination. His response is that it's a slippery slope, which tells me he hasn't read it yet, doesn't know it's actually part of our law. And then I wanted to ask a bit more, and then some people nearby started chanting the F word, so it got drowned out. And the police were around them. But when I asked that question, everybody's quiet, and lots of people quieted down to hear his answer, because I think people are thinking, hey, a serious question. Yeah, let's hear what this guy has to say. So I wanted to ask more serious questions. I think the serious questions tend to do well if people realize that they're being asked. So, So I found that quite interesting if you managed to talk to the Grand Wizard. That would have interested me to hear that interview.
Yeah, I mean, it was only, and very initially back in the early days, it was just going to be me recording a conversation. It wasn't going to be as formal, like this is kind of thing. It eventually became this. So
I think you could still do it. If you wanted, and it probably will attract a lot of attention because this kind of group is controversial and out in the open in the forefront, So there's probably a lot of people on their side might end up tuning in as well. And your YouTube comments section, I bet, will fill up.
So there was talk months ago about me doing either a separate theist interview channel or just having more theists on this channel. And I guess this channel isn't necessarily just for atheists. I've had Ocean on. I've had James from Modern Day Debate on. I think he's Christian or still Christian. I keep going to call him Christian as if it's his name.
He's a Christian. In the debate, he's impartial, and he's really good about that in the debate. I really have a lot of respect for him for that. Yeah, I think. Are you familiar with Empathetic Atheists channel?
Yeah, I was on.
Yeah, he's bringing on people all different stripes. So I think you're going to have the same kind of success if you bring on a few more theists. It'll be fine.
Yeah, it's definitely a market to tap into, as it were. I kind of find with Justin, Empathetic Atheist, and I said this as well. Sometimes the after parties, especially the time that I was on, I don't know exactly whether it's any different now, but it became like an hour between Pastor I've forgotten his name,
Pastor Taylor,
and Peter de Tucker. It was just going back and forth with one another. It wasn't really a very productive conversation, but there we are. Well, hopefully
run the show, right? So it depends on what you choose to focus on as the host. So you said there are other questions in the chat, right?
Oh, I said if there were other questions in the chat, I'll get to them. Although it is quite difficult. I am trying to keep tabs because I'm not at the other laptop. I've got two laptops open. I've got an iPad open. I've got the TV on. Everything's just out in the open. Just I can't quite reach the laptop over there. I am trying to redo a format just for everyone else's perspective. I'm just going to switch on the live stream. You won't see this, Randolph, because you're coming through the integrated camera. So that's me on that camera. So there is what I'm looking at here, with all sorts of different equipments and stuffs. So I mean, I don't know how relevant that is to you, Randolph, because you didn't see any of that.
That's okay. I put my thumbs up anyway.
Yeah.
You could do like the Daily Atheist and make a video and where you're showing how you've got your setup all configured, and you could reference back to his, and at the same time, maybe a whole chain of these can end up starting up.
Well, I did do that, and then I've changed everything. So yeah, I did have this really sort of small table. I couldn't put my knees under it. Horrible. Then I realised I've had this massive table. It's one of these outdoor fold-out tables everyone just saw for years. I haven't used it.
My laptop's sitting on a box right now.
Yeah,
it works.
Sometimes wherever it is, I just sort of leverage my laptop on one of them, just a camcorder case, just so it can. More height. Yeah, just a little bit of height, just allow the fans, which for some reason, I don't know why they're designed on laptops to go down. They typically should be going like out.
Yeah.
Opposed to, don't know why. But I don't know.
Oh, you found a solution.
Yeah. So anyway, we're going to talk about the state of atheism, and then get into some of the Alberta stuff. Is that right?
The what? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, the province of Alberta. So first of all, I think in my view, the state of atheism is that atheism is under siege, but it's kind of a subtle one. It's not so much out in the open in general. It's been an ongoing fight. We can even go back to people like Thomas Aquinas, who is often well respected in quite a few Christian circles in particular, as a philosopher of sorts, and take a look at some of the stuff he did. He was actually promoting governments to execute atheists, execute people who don't believe in the Christian God. So he was promoting genocide, and he was doing it consistent with what's in the Bible. And I'll just look up the passage in the Bible here, because people I know are probably going to want to look it up and say, oh, I got to see that. There is, you know how people are, so we better make sure that this is covered.
I make the same reference I always do. We don't fact check here. Everybody else to fact check what we say.
Okay, so I'll just read this passage from the King James translation of the Holy Bible, from 2 Chronicles 15:13. It says, "That whosoever would not seek the Lord God of Israel should be put to death, whether small or great, whether man or woman." And again, that's 2 Chronicles 15:13. So that is, to me, a call for genocide against anybody who doesn't believe in the Christian deity. So there's all kinds of excuses that come out, but when it comes down to it, you ask, is this an ethical thing to do? And people start. I did a poll a while ago. Most people will say they're against genocide, but there's a few people who said it's okay, or there's circumstances like if it's instructed by God, it's okay. And this is an attitude problem. That edict is the source, one of the sources of the attitude problem against atheists and some of this nonsense that I'm fighting against. So, just because I don't believe in a deity doesn't mean I should be killed. And so this is the kind of stuff that I'm objecting to. And this is why I say we're under siege. As long as that passage is there in the Bible, we're under siege from the Bible. The Quran, same thing. We look in countries like Saudi Arabia, where it was the Richard Dawkins Foundation a few years ago had reported on a new piece of legislation that they'd put into Saudi Arabia at the time. That anybody who is an atheist who doesn't believe in deities, especially in Allah, will be classified as a terrorist. And then people I know from Saudi Arabia have told me that the sentence is typically 1,000 lashes. It's like caning in Singapore, I guess. And it's extremely painful. And then once you've gone through all 1,000 lashes, and you keep recovering before you get more and more and more. So this goes on for quite a while. It's not all happening in one day. After you've got your 1,000 lashes, then you are executed. So it's a pretty miserable way to go. And that is a lot of hate and a lot of anger toward people just because we don't believe in deities. So there are some major problems still going on that need to be taken care of. And with the Canadian atheists, we routinely get contacts from people in all sorts of different countries, a lot from Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, who are trying to, who want to move out of their country and come to some other peaceful place like Canada. They tell me they don't believe in, they don't want to be Muslim anymore, or whatever religion they're following, typically Islam. And there's a few from Africa are having some issues with Islam or Christianity or whatever as well. And they're saying they don't want to be part of this, but they can't tell their family members or their friends or even their spouse about it. Otherwise, that person will turn them in, because the mentality is so strong on these things, so strong against it. So when anybody says that everything's peaceful, no, it's not. We're still under siege, and it's done at a more subtle level these days. So they're contacting us, asking us, how can we immigrate to Canada? And it's quite telling to me that when they're saying that they have to secretly pretend to be a believer, otherwise they could die for it. This is not the way to live. People should not have to have this kind of stress in their lives. It's wrong, it's unethical, and it's a violation of our human rights. So, this is what needs to be stopped. And, your logical fallacies that you cover kind of play into some of the arguments that support such bad ideas. And that's why it's important. I think books like yours are important contributing factors to making the world a better place, because if people can identify these fallacies more effectively, then they're less likely to fall for this and more likely to speak out against it when it's wrong. So.
Yep, exiled. I keep mispronouncing your name. It's probably just exiled. So it's pretty straightforward, Randolph. And they also spell your name PH rather than F.
Yeah, spell check does that to a lot of people automatically on their phones. So it's, I strive to get everybody's name spelled correctly. And I'm not perfect at it, but I certainly make a lot of effort to do that, especially before debates when I have my interlocutors. I try to do that. And when people get my names wrong, I'm okay with it. I don't take it personally, but I always try to make sure that I'm living up to my own standard. I don't push it on others.
Exiled says, screw Roundup. No, he doesn't say that. It says, sorry to misspell your name.
Well, he's free to say it if he wants.
Just didn't know, that's fine.
I'm an advocate for free expression after all.
Very good, yeah. So I wanted to bring up as well the fact that you're the only guest who insists that atheist is spelt with a lowercase a. Although I have heard this from other people before, you're the only guest to have said it. So,
Oh, okay. So insist is probably not the word I would use.
what I would use.
Yeah, I know. You're not me. There's probably a fallacy to describe this. You'll have to let me know.
Argument by assertion.
You're going to be searching now, aren't you?
No, it's argument by assertion. Let's carry on.
Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So you're right on the ball with this stuff. I'm impressed. So let's see. There's with a Canadian atheist, we registered with our government purposely with a lowercase a, because atheism is it's consider color. The word color. It's a classification. People don't normally capitalize the word color in normal kind of usage. It's a capital when it's the beginning of the sentence, and that's about it. It doesn't really tell you any position or anything else like that. It's just classified that that's all it is. And so you've got all these different colors: red, green, blue, yellow, etc. Cyan, magenta, the list goes on. And then, to be technically correct, it does not include white, black, or gray, and the various shades of gray. But as a matter of convenience, a lot of people will use color to also refer to black, white, and gray. So the same thing happens with atheism. People will, and this doesn't justify capitalizing the letter, but it's with atheism, there are different ways that people will use the word. And even though technically it really is just the absence of belief in deity, it's just classification, people can use it as a position. There's nothing stopping people from doing that. And those are valid definitions too. So it is polysemous, just like color is polysemous, not only from that respect, but for other ways too. Color can talk about the character of a person, things like that. And it's unfortunately used in some pretty derogatory ways as well. And same with atheism, it's been used in derogatory ways. So the words atheist and atheism, I consider them classificational. So I use them in the same manner that I use the word color as a classification. Some people will take it, like Stephen McCrae that you mentioned earlier, will take it as meaning specifically a limited scope of being anti-theistic, as saying the opposite position with theism. And while that's certainly okay because of the polysemous nature of the word, the fact that I can't ignore is that the underlying fundamental characteristic of this is just not believing deities. And that's what all the polysemous variations share, is that underlying fundamental characteristic. So the classification aspect of it. So it can be a position, but that's optional. It doesn't have to be. So this is important because it's because atheism is under siege, and we have people who are trying. There are people who are trying, unfortunately, to vilify atheism and vilify atheists, and create all these kinds of problems. One of the most common tactics that the vilifiers use is to say, "You're taking position there; deities don't exist." But I'm not taking that position. Most atheists I know are not taking that position. And so, they're trying to shift a burden of proof onto me so they can discredit me. They're trying to misrepresent my position. And this happens quite a bit. And this lays the groundwork for them to vilify. See, they hate God because they're against it. And they kind of jump to all these other conclusions. And they want us atheists to always be on the defensive on this kind of stuff. And I'm saying, no, we don't need to be on the defensive on this because we're not making this claim. The ones who are, that's fine. They carry an onus of justification or a burden of proof, as more commonly called. But it's not required. If you're, and if someone who carries that burden of proof, of course, they, when they make a positional statement like that, then they do need to support it. If they want to be considered credible. They don't have to support it, but if they want to be taken as credible, then they need to support that somehow. And I think that their burden is probably, I think the anti-theistic burden is probably higher, probably greater than the theistic burden. Because with the theist, all they have to do is somehow prove that the deity exists. Where an anti-theist, an atheistic position, you're going to have to rule out every corner of the cosmos, every part of it. The theist doesn't have a burden that great. So in a sense, it's harder for the anti-theist. The anti-theist will have to be smarter about this in defending that position. So, you know, they've taken on a much greater burden in that. Now, that may be music to the ears of some theists, and that may be considered controversial by some. That's just one way of looking at it. The other thing people will sometimes say is, oh, you can't call babies atheists. I don't go around doing that, but I will address this point here because it does come up as well. In order to believe in a deity, logically, one must first have some kind of basic idea about what a deity is, the concept. They don't have to have a full, completed concept of that deity, that goddess, or that god. They just need to have a general, very basic, very rudimentary idea, sufficient enough to believe in it. Now, most people probably learn what a deity is from others. A few people probably create it on their own. And if you don't have a concept of what that is, then you don't believe in deities. You're an atheist. Doesn't really matter whether or not you accept the term. You just fit the classification. It's just like, you know, you and I are human beings. We may not know the word human beings if we're from a different language or if we're a newborn baby human, but that doesn't preclude us from being human beings. So this same kind of thing goes on. So when people come along and say that, now when people are going and throwing that in people's faces and use that in an argument, I don't favor that. I think it's quite silly, but it's usually meant to stir up some kind of trouble and tick people off. It's not a constructive way to go about having conversation, I think. But it is still a fact that I think can't be denied. It's just the way it is. So yeah. So that's why I use it as a lowercase a, because it is a classification. It is natural. It is, and by not having by being just a classification, which is a fact. Atheism has no doctrine. It has no edicts. It has no central leadership or anything like that. Just like a color doesn't have any of those things. It doesn't. Neither colors and neither atheism have anything that says we must conform to this. You must be an atheist for X number of days before you can say you're an atheist. You must be the color red for a certain number of days before you can qualify to be the color red. All these kinds of things. It doesn't work that way. It's just the classification can come and go in a moment's notice. Somebody could suddenly decide they believe in they want to believe in Zeus or somebody and or Thor or whoever, and they're now a theist. They're no longer an atheist, and there's nothing there, any expectation built in or anything like that. No expectation of conformity, and so there is nothing wicked about it, nothing bad about it. There's nothing particularly good or bad about it. It's just incidental to all that other stuff. Whereas I think one of the reasons that theism has a kind of a dangerous aspect to it is because it has this demand for conformity. You must conform to this or else. Like that edict I read earlier from 2 Corinthians about killing anybody who doesn't believe. Now there's an expectation of conformity, and it has a lot of danger attached to it. But even without, when you have a group of people who all expect that you're going to conform a certain way, that's peer pressure. And that's not encouraging people to think for themselves. That's telling people that they need to follow a certain standard. And that's something that atheism just doesn't do. So in essence, one of the underlying implicit characteristics of atheism is freedom. And as an advocate for freedom myself, I really, really like atheism. This is one of the reasons it matters to me.
Yeah, I'm just keeping tabs as well on the live chat. Neil has come back from lunch. Why? Why he wasn't just listening anyway? I mean,
how come? Ask Neil what he had for dessert.
Well, he says that shirt Randolph is wearing. Yeesh. Don't know whether he's disapproving. But going back to what Neil was saying just now, how exactly can you disprove something that hasn't yet been proven? And well, I would turn those words around and say, how can you disapprove of Randolph's shirt when nobody's approved of it yet?
You know what I would say to that? I would say, ask Kent Hovind's CPA.
What does that stand for? I've been dying to know. What does that actually stand for?
CPA?
Yeah.
It's a chartered professional accountant, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they used to be CAs here, chartered accountants, and we had CGA for chartered general accountant. I think they've all, in recent years, been amalgamated into one designation of CPA. So you get one post-nominal instead of a variety of them.
Interesting. Yeah, I really wanted to talk about something that you had brought to my attention as well in Alberta. What is actually going on?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So what happened is Alberta just about a week ago finally got royal assent on what they call Bill 1. It's Bill 1 for 2020 anyway, for the year 2020. You can't just go by the number itself. It's called the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act. And what it does is it, in short, makes it so that they can put anybody in jail for protesting in public streets. Peaceful assembly is one of our rights under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is enshrined in our Constitution as fundamental to every, and it applies, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms applies not just to citizens of Canada, but also people who are visiting. Everybody's equal under the law, according to Section 7. So those white supremacists who came to Vancouver a few years ago to share their views, they're protected under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms to speak their views here, just like citizens are. And this is very important, that everybody be treated equally under the law. And peaceful assembly is under Section 2C of our charter, C for Charlie. It is one of our fundamental freedoms. And what the province of Alberta has done is they've put in legislation that classifies all this public space as critical infrastructure. And then they have in there something that says if the police think that there is somebody's violating that in using critical infrastructure for, it doesn't say protesting directly, but it covers protesting the way it's worded, they can throw them in jail. And there's other, that can lead potentially to other violations of our charter, such as being notified of being arrested with proper warrant. And this is really not properly warranted because it conflicts with our charter rights. And so they've also got some other dubious things in there, like under Section 5 of Bill 1, it grants a lot more power to a rather broad power to the Governor General, Lieutenant Governor General of, or Lieutenant, they say as well, Lieutenant Governor General of Alberta. They're also, we're talking about, and she can just make these laws without getting any kind of approval. So that's too much power. So with that, she's not equal under the law, and it's that's just somebody's got it. It's a phone. So she's, by doing that, they're making that person in that role unequal to other citizens. Now, a lot of people will make the mistake of saying inequality, we want everyone to be up to a certain level. They can't be below, but people often miss the point when somebody goes above. We're all supposed to be, and if we go back to the Magna Carta 900 years ago, there was this idea that the kings have to be accountable to the law as well as all the citizens, everybody else. And before, it was the kings could just throw people in jail without having to justify it, but this kind of stuff has changed. So that was an early step in this. Before our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we had the Bill of Rights, which most of the Bill of Rights are in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms now. And the few things that aren't, when judges are making decisions here in Canada that are kind of in this area, if it's not covered by the charter, they will still refer to the Bill of Rights, because the Bill of Rights is still law. It's and people sometimes make that mistake. I've seen the point that I'm making about people being greater or lesser in the law. We're all supposed to be equal in the law. If somebody's less than that, people will often have a lot of sympathy for that. But when somebody's greater than that, it's unfortunate that many people will say, oh, that's not important because they're not suffering, so it's okay. No, it's not okay. Everybody has to be equal. And the law has to apply equally to everybody. When it comes to freedom of expression, the same mistake is made, which may be more familiar to a lot of people, is that where a person's saying, I'm not, they're saying you can't restrict their speech, but then you have a Human Rights Commission comes along and compels people to say something. Well, compulsion is also a violation as much as an oppression is. You know, on my Twitter account, I have a quote that I made up. It was inspired by something Martin Luther King Jr. said. It was oppression anywhere is a threat to freedom everywhere. And it's important because, and this is one of the reasons why, even though I'm here in BC, I've written this letter to Alberta to ask their Lieutenant Governor General to withhold royal assent, to basically reject it. The terminology they use is withhold. They can approve it or they can withhold it, and so they. So this, unfortunately, it did receive royal assent before my letter got to them, because the day I mailed it out, I found out later, it's the same day that it got royal assent. So the letter's already been sent out. So I did follow up with them yesterday. I even left them a voicemail message. Haven't heard back yet. So I will continue to follow up. But if I don't get a response from them, then I'm going to have to look at other options. Also going through all the system. There's one fellow I know from the other end of the country here in Canada who is contacting me. He brought this to my attention originally. And he's since been recruiting quite a lot of people to call our members of parliament and the MLAs throughout Alberta to object to this. And I've been in touch with a few different lawyers who are just giving me their views on this stuff and suggestions on how to improve it. It's been quite wonderful, the support that's coming through on it. There's a lot of people who are very concerned about this, because violating the charter here anywhere in Canada means that if I go to Alberta, I can't join any public protests in the streets. If there's a Black Lives Matter protest, if there's an oil protest, if there's a Indigenous people protest, First Nation stuff, whatever. If I participate in any of those protests, no matter how peaceful they are, and when they're violent, I don't want to be around, but if they're peaceful, I'll stick around. If I go there and the police decide to arrest me, I've broken the law in Alberta, and that violates my charter rights. So now I'm not equal everywhere in Canada anymore. These rights don't apply equally to me wherever I go. I have some restrictions in effect as a consequence of these laws. I don't want that restriction imposed on me, so I'm against that. So that it's important to stand up against this kind of injustice when it happens, and I encourage more people to stand up against such injustices when they happen, because if we don't stand up against it, it's harder to get our rights back once they're lost, and that's the situation we're in with Alberta right now. We need that law repealed, because most of it's redundant, it already covers things in the law, and then the few extra things it does are a violation of our charter rights. So that's what we're trying to do, is keep things back to where they should be. So I'm probably going to have to go up to the federal level to appeal to them to override what Alberta's done. My understanding too is that there's a union in Alberta somewhere that has just started taking it to court, or they're considering doing that as a charter challenge, a legal challenge. So this is really good too. There's a lot of people concerned about it. Some of the people, the supporters, are also saying they're going to call and be very angry and yell and scream at these people. And this is only going to fall on deaf ears. I think that the right approach to doing this is always to use peaceful advocacy. Write it in a professional way, tell them what your concerns are, make it all logical and straightforward, so it comes across as calm and cool, and this is a genuine concern. And that's the approach I always promote. So other people are going to use their own style. I can't stop them. If they're going to do that, okay. I will encourage them to use a more peaceful approach, of course, but that's the most that I can do. I can't tell them not to call up and use swear words on the phone. So
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, good stuff, man. I find it very interesting how I put out a tweet, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I can't remember, where I asked people whether they were in favour of, or rather, the wording was, is violent protest more successful, or is it somehow more preferable to
depends on
peaceful
who's in
protest?
charge. It depends on who's in charge.
Go for it.
Depends on who has the power. Yeah.
So, in terms of how, well, explain that one. So, what certain circumstances would it be permitted?
Oh, I don't think it would ever be permitted, but especially by those in power who you need to use it against, especially under them, they won't permit it.
Well,
But
hold on. Yeah, you know what I
where you
mean. Like, yeah,
justify it.
justifies what I meant. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked permitted though, because I think it's good to get that out there. It's a good question.
Yeah, you know what I
It's a
meant.
very good question. I think like when you've got, let's see, we see some governments where, let's say the case with Adolf Hitler is probably a pretty easy one. A lot of people could see going back, and there's people who've said if they could travel back in time, they'd go and kill the guy. So yeah, there's somebody who's committing genocide, and he's got such a tight rein on leadership. Any kind of peaceful protest against him is obviously not going to be successful, and it's probably going to be at least detrimental to the protesters' health, or probably lethal. They'll probably get thrown in the gas chambers along with all the other victims at that time, and for doing it, or just executed on the street by the SS. So that's why, this is why we end up having wars waged in the world. It's unfortunate that it gets to that point. And but sometimes there really isn't much other option, because you can be as peaceful as you want, but if the other side has all the guns and they're shooting all the peaceful protesters, you're going to run out of peaceful protesters, and it's going to be a non-issue for them. So I would say these would have to be pretty dire circumstances where a violent protest comes into play. I look at the situation in the U.S. with George Floyd being murdered on the streets by uh, by murderers masquerading as ethical police officers. That's what I like to call them, because I don't think that they're the right people for the job. The guy who had his knee on George Floyd's neck, obviously that's the one I'm thinking of right there. I'm sorry I forgot his name, but I remember George Floyd's name, which is the important name to remember.
Yeah.
And so I don't care if I don't remember the officer's name. Because what he did was clearly and obviously wrong, especially when you had somebody on the street saying, the reports were, I don't know if this actually happened, but it makes sense to me. There was somebody talking to the officer, saying, hey, you get off his neck, he can't breathe. I practice jujitsu and I deal with chokeholds and stuff. You got to get off. He's going to die. Something like that, or maybe something to that effect. One of the passersby said that. But people aren't going to go out and fight with the police. The police, otherwise, they're going to find themselves in trouble too, right? So if it's going to be a violent protest in a situation like that, imagine if maybe a group of 50 guys came along and saw this happening to this guy, and they know that he's getting killed. 50 of those guys could probably overtake those officers, and then you'd see something, they'd be placing those officers under citizen's arrest. They'd be outnumbered, but it still will be a violent struggle. Somebody's going to get hurt, because those officers are going to try to not allow that to happen, especially with that group. So I think the response to that is not just one issue. Obviously, there's been a long-standing problem in the U.S. with all this systemic racism issues and this unfairness. As I understand it, there's nothing in the Constitution in the U.S. That prohibits racism. I could be wrong on that, but this is what a number of Americans have told me, is that there's things in our charter that they wish were in the American Constitution, and then there's some things that the U.S. Constitution, I think, does better than us as well. So Canada could also take some benefit from that. One of them, I think, is taking things a bit more literally for freedom of expression and being fully in support of it. But nonetheless, this whole discrimination problem is just awful. I saw a meme recently that showed the planet Earth, and they show skin colors on different continents. And all along the equator, it's all very dark, and then it gets lighter and lighter all the way up to the poles. And they're saying the reason people's skin tincture is different is because of where they live. So there's more melanin in the skin, it's darker. So it blocks more sun. But when people with more melanin come to the north or the south, they're blocking, there's less sun, so they get less vitamin D. And anyway, they was pointing out all this stuff, and I was saying, look, these people, this is what people are fighting about. We're all the same species. We're all the same, and yet there's people fighting over color of the skin, angry at each other, hateful toward each other because of the color of their skin. And I thought this picture really exemplified this well, because it really showed this very well, because it shows how trivial and how ridiculous this whole racist attitudes are, right? So growing up here in Canada, we're in a multicultural civilization, especially here in BC. We've got it pretty good. I know a fellow who's very dark skin, black, they'd say, and he married I think a Danish lady, and they have 2 kids. Both the kids seem quite white. One of them has blonde hair, and I think he gets questions once in a while about, is this really your kid? And it is. The DNA all matches up. Stuff happens, right? So DNA, you can't always predict what's going to happen. He was telling me that when he went through university, that he encountered racism in the university as well. So very sadly, we have a problem with racist attitudes here in Canada as well. It's unfortunate. And but I do think that when I look at what's going on in the US and I compare, even my relatives in Alberta at the time, their attitudes have waned. People live in Alberta now, there's a lot less of the issue there, but those old attitudes still are very strong in the US. And South is that way from me right now, in case anyone's wondering. And I find it very sad, because it's a major hindrance to society, because you've got people who are being mistreated, you've got people who are not getting the resources that they need to live a better life. And if America is supposed to be the greatest country in the world to live in, then these problems shouldn't exist. But because they exist, then by trivial definition, they're not the greatest country to live in. The US has a lot of work to do to fix that. And they've got people dying for it, and it's sad. There's people who want to shut down entire police departments because those police departments are corrupt. And then you've got other parts of the US where the police are walking in lockstep with the Black Lives Matter protesters because they're not racist. They're actually running the police department ethically and properly, and the whole society in those towns are doing just fine with it. That's what we need. We need to see more of in the U.S. is more of that kind of stuff going on, and less of all this racism stuff. And it's awful, because people can't control certain factors about them. You're born, well, they can control the sex now to a certain degree, but it's really hard. It's a lot of planning and a lot of hard work to do it, to change your sex. It's not something you just flip a switch and you change your sex overnight, as some evangelicals seem to think it is. But you don't really get choice on the color of your skin, or your natural hair color, or your natural eye color, or anything like that, and your height and different stuff like that. There's a lot of these factors we just don't have control over as people. And to discriminate against people based on some of these kind of factors is to me, it's bigoted, it's unfair, and it's usually done out of a bit of a phobia of sorts, I guess. People are doing it out of fear, maybe, or somehow they have some kind of hatred that's developed. I think in most cases the hatred is probably learned. I would say, if not all of them, the vast majority of cases it's learned. There may be a few people who are naturally just like that, I suppose, but I suspect that's pretty rare. I think, they need better education systems in the U.S. that have more integration, less segregation, in these kinds of things. They've got entire schools that are just one race, as I've heard it, and that's a problem. In those schools, depending on which race it is, there's been a pattern that's been discovered where with certain races that there's a lot less funding. And so, of course, that's going to result. And then people commit the fallacy of the consequence. So here's a fallacy for you. They'll say, "Oh, well, there's more crime in black neighborhoods." Yeah, well, but let's take a look. That's not a direct causal relationship there. There's correlative factors, like there's not enough funding for the schools. There's a lot of the roads are neglected and whatnot. Whereas in the nice neighborhoods where there's rich people, they can influence their governments and in ways that'll motivate them with money, because they have lots of money to throw away. The rich people can get a much nicer thing because their government will pay more attention to them. So capitalism is probably, I would say, a big factor in a lot of this too. It's definitely got blood on its hands as well on this. But mostly you got a lot of people who are just terrible. And then they've got an administration right now who's promoting inciting violence and hatred and whatnot. It's awful. It's just a really, it's not a situation that looks like it's one that could work long term. I don't think so. I hope that answers your question.
I can't remember the question. What I was going to do, because it feels like we've been going for 8 hours.
Wow. Sorry, am I that boring?
No. It's not remotely boring at all. Don't worry. It's really interesting, but it also feels, because it's the heat as well. I don't know if you've had the similar sort of experience in Canada where everything's just sort of sweltering as past few days.
Yeah, it is last few days especially.
Yeah. And it's just it becomes more intense to be sort of standing for this long, for just sort of like I feel physically like I'm sweating, not actually showing up on the shirt, which is great. For people
you're not sitting down.
No, no, I'm full on.
Oh wow. I thought you're like sitting on a chair or a stool or something.
No.
Oh man. I got a chair here. A nice, comfortable chair.
For anyone who wants merch where you don't actually feel like you're sweating, maybe it's just me, I don't know. Hopefully it's the merch. Then check out the link down below. See what happens.
Yeah, I'm curious. Is in your neck of the woods the Black Lives Matter stuff that's going on in the U.S.? What seems to be the general perspective there about it?
So over here, we typically speaking, I haven't heard anything specifically saying that police officer was right in what they did. What we see, yeah. So what we see is a number of different protests for Black Lives Matter, but the context is different, and it's probably well worth mentioning at this point. A really interesting statistic, which is countries like ours, or countries like Sweden or Denmark or the Netherlands, they end up being described as the freest countries in terms of the rights that you have, but they are all constitutional monarchies.
Like us.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, because I don't know whether that's causal. I wouldn't know whether that's I don't know, it could be a fallacy of the consequence. That's the new one I haven't heard of. But I find it really interesting throwing that perspective out there for people who are so hardcore on the whole secular thing, because I'm like, well, we're over 50% atheist or non-believer in the UK, and we're doing fine. Like, so yeah. It's interesting. It is very interesting.
So we're a constitutional monarchy here, but we have, I think, as I recall, in recent years, we broadened our sovereignty, and the Queen, basically her roles have been delegated to our Governor General at the federal level and Lieutenant Governor Generals at the provincial levels for the royal assent stuff. Has been delegated pretty well permanently, as I understand. So we're more kind of sovereign on our own, and it's more just kind of a tradition that it's staying in place, that there's stuff there. But my understanding is that like there's still the issue of crown land and stuff like that that's I guess needs to be cleared up at some point. So I think we're probably more, because we're so far away continentally, that probably there's less of a tie-in for us to the monarchy than what you have there, I suppose. So but we still have a lot of the similarities in our system. You probably got a governor general kind of position in your government too that deals with laws and stuff like that.
So the way it would work, we have for a bill to have royal assent, it needs to go through the Commons 3 times, it needs to go through the Lords 3 times, and then it gets signed off after some amendments by the monarch.
We got 3 readings here and then royal assent, so you've got 6 readings in effect. Okay.
Yeah, so we go through a proper thorough reading, although the Lords can send stuff back to the Commons if it rejects it, but ultimately the Commons has its way. I mean, there was a little bit of back and forth with the Brexit stuff, where the Lords was very much a Remain chamber. So
laws here will generally get royal assent. The idea with the governor general and lieutenant governor generals is that as part of granting royal assent, part of their job is to make sure that the laws that are being put in are not conflicting with our charter rights. That's one of the things they're supposed to do. And with Alberta, it seems that this didn't happen. It seems that this was missed. And there are quite a few people who think that it's the lieutenant governor general's job to just take orders from the politicians. So what's the point of having this position then?
Yeah.
No, those are people who favor it. Those are people who don't want Black Lives Matter protesting in Canada. And they're saying, great, Alberta's taking the lead on it. I've encountered people like this online who've given me those straight goods. It's like, wow, this is the wrong attitude. It's sad.
Yeah.
Your governor generals are supposed to do that kind of stuff too, I guess.
I wouldn't know what the alternative role would be, so I probably shouldn't speak on that. What I would throw out there is there's been a fairly big move, or at least a rekindling of the fire, concerning the statue of Cecil Rhodes in Oxford. And as such, I've looked up a little bit more about it. I still don't quite know enough, but he has his name put to the Rhodes Scholarship and things like Rhodesia, which then later I think became, was it Zimbabwe?
Okay.
I mean, he had a whole country named after him. So he was massive sort of slavey person. As it were, and so people are saying, take down the statue, take down the statue. And I was watching a Stephen Fry interview yesterday.
Stephen Fry is well liked here in Canada, by the way.
Yeah, he was arguing that it should stay up and that the statue should be there. And this interview was happening years ago, so he was talking about the statue, that specific statue, and just taking down statues in general. It's just it's gone through the YouTube algorithm, obviously. And he has very interesting perspectives on free speech and how to go about educating people and saying, hey, a statue doesn't actually have to be people we admire, or we can look at a statue and say, actually, they had some flaws as well. This is a complicated discussion. It's not just such a clean cut, this was a good person, this is evil over here. And it's just, no. If we judged everybody by their bad side, then there would be no statues. You would have no friends. You would never talk to anyone.
Yeah.
He's
taking it to an extreme, which is important because that tells us where it can go. Yeah. As Christopher Hitchens once said about his criticism of Islam, it's the reason he goes after the extremists is because the extremists are the tail that wag the whole dog.
Well, that's a very interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. I'm just putting this on charge.
He and Stephen Fry were good friends, as I understand it, too.
Yeah, I don't know how much they talked one another.
Well, they seem to have a lot of the same kind of attitudes and ideas. So.
Yeah, I do find we sorely miss Christopher, obviously.
I remember Stephen Fry had a small role in V is for Vendetta, the movie, and I was a little disappointed. I would have liked it if we saw a bit more of him because he's really good on stage, and it would have been neat if his role was a bit bigger.
Our minds are exactly the same, because after watching various different interviews and talks like that. I did actually download V for Vendetta and watched it again last night as
Oh,
well.
you thought
So
the same thing. It was
yeah,
a good movie. Yeah.
I forgot a lot about it. Yeah, there's this wonderful scene where it's Natalie Portman ends up ending to be like this weird schoolgirl, and the priest was all like, "Oh yeah, this is great," and then Fee comes in, and kills him.
Yeah.
I completely
Yeah.
forgot about that scene.
You know,
Yeah,
she's, as I understand it, Natalie Portman is quite well educated in sciences and is actively involved in scientific research or something. I'm not clear on the details, but I remember reading quite a long time ago she was contributing to science, and I thought, you know, this is interesting because you hear about some of these other people like Kanye West, and what are his hobbies? It's just stupid stuff. Compared in comparison to stuff like this, she's doing something meaningful with her life, and just somehow fell into acting or something. So
yeah.
good on her, you know.
What I was going to do, because I don't know how long these. I wouldn't know how long people have, but I don't have a huge amount of time. So, throw people in the direction of where they can find you and any future stuff that's coming up, any debates or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm the founding president of the Canadian Atheists. Here in Canada, you can find out more about us at canadianatheists.ca. That's www.canadianatheists.ca. .com will also work. And if you wanted to reach me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is Randolf828. That's Randolf. So you know, and if you get a chance, do buy David's book. It's it's an important.
Well, this one.
Yes,
right,
this
yeah.
one.
Yeah, I saw on Instagram Rachel Oates actually got her copy in the end, because it's awkward how it has to go to a PO box and then get sent to where they are. But yeah, she'll hopefully she's promised to do a review at some point.
Oh, great! Congratulations.
Which could be good, could be bad, given the state of the reviews that she's done for other people before. But
okay. If you're welcoming it before it happens, that's a good thing, because you know, hopefully people will take her review, agree or disagree with her. They'll hopefully just buy your book and try to make up their mind for themselves again.
Hope so. There was a burst. I don't know whether it was. I mean, it coincided with the audiobook being accepted. So I put the audiobook down. Was rejected for background noise, and then I re-recorded, sent it off, and it was fine. And it got put up on the 19th. And on that day, for some reason, I don't know why, there was a huge influx of paperback sales. So about half of the paperback sales was come in the past week or something like that.
I wonder if audiobooks drive paperback sales.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I can only assume it was promoted somewhere that I don't know. But if it was promoted somewhere that I don't know about, then fantastic. I really hope people find it useful. There's an awful lot of people on Goodreads as well. There's like a 24 people that have got it in their to read list. Well, yeah. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for the way it's being received. Anyway,
well, sounds like it's turning into a great success for you. I hope it is. Yeah,
I have gone on and off with whether to actually start the second. I mean, I have started it in that I know what 50 fallacies I'm going to do. But I don't know yet whether I'm going to do a book a year, because it does take time just to sit down and actually go through it, and you need to be in the mood to do it as well.
Don't rush yourself. Don't rush yourself. Figure out what works best for you. Some people work better under pressure. If that's not you, then you got to figure out the best way for yourself. There's different writers clubs. There's all kinds of different advice floating around, and the best one I ever see is figure out what works best for you and go with that. It's just like anything in life, right? I'm working on a book as well about atheism, and I've been working on it for years, but I want to try to get a traditional publisher interested in publishing it. But if I can't, I'll probably go the Amazon route that you have, because it sounds like it's worked out quite well for you. So does
Yeah.
Amazon take care of printing it and everything?
Yeah. Oh, I'm not doing it. Don't worry. I haven't got like a
Yeah, no,
big
I'm
bit.
curious how that works.
Yeah,
So
you can
yeah.
just hear in the background all the churning of the paper that's just been cut up. So Amazon does everything apart from the actual book itself. Obviously, you just submit a transcript. It's very straightforward to go through if anyone wants to independently publish. But I think I get something like because it's a fiver, I get something like £2 depending on which version you actually get. I don't know how it works in terms of ebook because you can get a free copy on. If you've got a subscription to Kindle, it just goes out free. I don't know what cut I get of the £0 that go towards that, but.
What is a quid? I'm sorry. I use Canadian currency.
No, so a quid just means your currency. Typically, we would say a quid meaning a pound sterling.
So 1 quid of Canadian would be $1 here. Okay.
Yeah, so you can still use the word quid to mean Canadian dollar. It would still.
Okay.
It's just a synonym for currency.
I wasn't sure if it was some kind of a breakdown, like a portion of a pound or something. So that's what I was wondering. You say 2 quids. It sounds pretty specific.
Quite right. I don't think I actually have very much control over the costing of the audiobook. I think they have more control over that, but you can change your prices for paperback and the ebook.
Yeah.
So
now they don't provide an editor for you, though, do they?
No, this is why this is
self-publishing.
This is we haven't practiced this. Randolph just pushed people towards my YouTube perks that have just come on screen. So in terms of trying to help out the channel and becoming a proofreader for the book, you can upgrade your membership on YouTube or your Patreon, obviously, and that you'll end up, if you're on a high enough tier, you'll end up getting the copies of the books in the future before anybody else. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, congratulations on your first book. I'm very happy for you because it sounds like it's going well for you. So
it is, and I'm very grateful for the way it's received. But anyway, stuff talking about me. More should really talk more about you. Although we are cutting it now, so the only things. Yeah, that's fine. Vincent as well. I'm trying to avoid this iPad at the minute.
See, there's some chat messages there.
Yeah, there's quite a bit from Vincent. It says, fantastic stream. It's still rocking 5 stars on Goodreads. Thank you for that, Vincent. I think it was Vincent and Mars that ended up promoting it, making sure that I was on Goodreads in the first place, which is a great place to be if you are an author. It would seem people really, it makes the rounds, kind of thing. So final word goes to Vincent then. I visited Canada back in December, absolutely loved it. Specifically was in Collingwood and Toronto. Bloody tourist. I don't know.
I'm at the other end of the country, but I've been out there. It's nice in those areas too. Yeah.
Sweet. I'll wrap this one up. Randolph, it's always nice talking to you. It's a shame that we only get to talk every 100 podcasts. But it means that there's a much more fruitful conversation to be had.
Well, if it doesn't have to be every 100, we can. I'm flexible. So.
Yes, it does. We know what you're like. I don't know whether we haven't discussed other streams yet, but is it necessary? How anal are you on the 42 thing? Because does that include?
No, you see, you're thinking that. Remember when we first did DRP 42, you had a couple of different options available. So I just jokingly said, "Oh, I'll take number 42 because of Douglas Noel Adams, who I like to refer to as DNA because it confuses certain theists in debates." You can imagine the fun people have with that, but but I always let them in on it at some point, not too far off. But I don't want to string them along for too very long on stuff like that. But I just kind of thought the number was there, so I thought just have some fun with it. So it doesn't really matter. A number is just a number. There's no superstition with it or anything. and it's just for fun. It's the answer to life, the universe, and everything, according to Douglas Adams. So. His Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that's so I was quite delighted that I was in on number 42 originally. That was pretty cool. So because I do like the number because of the background there. So,
yeah, I'm the only other not really concerned.
I'm not fussy, so don't worry about it. However the schedule works is fine.
Yeah, I interpret that as I am fussy because you said it so many times. In terms of stream,
you used a different word. I'm just being polite.
I'll get you back on at some point for the 420th stream. It will be a 420 stream, I'm sure. There'll be a number of different people on. Anyway.
Oh, that'll be good. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully by that point I've taken over the world. There we are. Anyway, we're going to shut this one down. If you want to have a way of helping the channel, then please consider Patreon and PayPal, and even as much as Bitcoin or YouTube membership. There's all sorts of different ways. You could buy the book. You could do all sorts in order to support my work. Randolph's links are down in the description as well, and I will hopefully have you back in 100 podcast time.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate the time today, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Take care, everybody.